One Saturday, my parents had decided to go visit an aunt who lived in Minnesota. We were living in Wisconsin. And during the night, my uncle came to tell us that my parents had been in an accident. They had been hit by a drunk driver. Of course, family members were coming in and helping with the funeral arrangements, and they started going through all of the papers to find out that there wasn't any insurance. We thought this is just the way things happened. When a catastrophe like this happens, people start, giving money and helping pay for this or making donations of this. So we really never realized we didn't have insurance because we didn't know it was something you were to have and it would have made a difference. Right after the funerals, it was decided that we would move to Minnesota with an aunt and stay with her. Of course, there was no money. So not only had we lost our parents, we'd lost all of our familiar surroundings, our friends and everything like that. And it didn't work out. We just wanted to be home. We wanted our life to be back to the way it was before the accident. After the dust had settled somewhat, and we'd go out to the cemetery. There was no tombstone because there was no money to buy one. And it bothered us that, you go into the cemetery, there's all these beautiful monuments, and there's this lump of dirt where my parents are buried. So we took and sold all of our belongings in a garage sale, and we raised enough money to buy a tombstone to put out at the cemetery. Eventually, my sister, brother, and I were separated. They were put into one foster home, and I was put into another. The first foster home I was put into didn't work out right, so then I moved on to another foster home. We really didn't have a chance to ever get back together after that. And I think that's why it's hard for us to get together now. We don't have good memories to share with each other. The last time we were together were all bad memories. It was the accident and the funerals. I guess I just can't describe how hard it was. Had my parents been knowledgeable about insurance and had they had coverage, I really feel that, yes, I would have still lost them, but I would have had the rest of my family. If it wasn't for Tim and his family, who knows what would have happened to me. I'm proud to be married to Tim, and I'm proud that he's an insurance agent. I think it's kind of fate that my husband is in the insurance business and that I also work in the industry. I always feel that everything in life happens for a reason. People don't like to talk about death or tragedies, but perhaps by sharing my story, they will realize that it can happen to anybody. Therefore, everyone needs to protect their families. And the only way to do that is with life insurance.
When we started working together, it was funny because we attracted the exact opposite clients. I would be sitting here and a cash buyer for a $350,000 piece of property would walk in. She would sit here and a person wanted to buy this little $30,000 house that she would get them into. I mean, it just worked.
They complemented each other in that respect, Jeannie was more the business type aggressor, and Linda had the knowledge, the experience, and was a very successful real estate agent.
We met Stephanie and Patty in, I believe, April of '96.
Jeannie didn't want to have much to do with us at first. I mean, she wasn't around much. Linda was a sweetheart. She didn't really want to talk about insurance, of course, who does?
Linda had a checkbook and signed everything, and I couldn't tell you, now I can, but at that point I couldn't ever tell you what I was signing.
Then we came back the following year because we had heard that they moved. So we came over to check out their new office, and Stephanie and I, we just looked at each other and said, you know what, we need to review their insurance program, because we could just tell that the overhead had to be substantially higher. There were more people here, and just that many things had changed for them. They had grown a lot in those 10 months.
What they were recommending was, it's called the buy-sell life insurance, and basically was If something happened to me, Linda wouldn't want to end up with my 20-year-old as her partner, and I didn't want to end up with her husband as my partner type of thing. So it would buy the family out and make sure that, you know, there'd be enough at least to keep the business going until you added somebody or decided what you were going to do.
She left at noon. She said she'd be home about 5 or 6. She was going to Bridger. At the time, I really didn't know she was with my sister. My sister's husband called and said Leah and my mom had been in a car accident in Rockville.
It was March 15th, and I was here at the office, and one of the agents here said that Jenny, Linda's oldest daughter, was looking for me. I said, "You want me to come over?"
So we were sitting and waiting and praying and waiting, and then I saw a cop car drive into our lane, and so then he came in and told me that my mom had been killed in an automobile accident.
We stayed pretty much most of the night, and then I went home and waited for the sun to come up because I didn't want to wake one of the insurance agents too early, and I waited. As soon as that sun come over, it was like 5:30, 5:45 or whatever, I was on the phone with her, and I just said, "Linda's dead, what do I do?" I mean, I really didn't know what we had or what was covered or what the kids had, or, you know.
I knew that the case was in force, and so I just reassured her and told her it was going to be okay.
Real estate is such a volatile business. You know, one month you have the money pouring in, and then you go a couple of months without it. And it probably wasn't until about 6 months after Linda's death that I realized the importance of Jeannie having the insurance.
When we went to the funeral, gee whiz, there was like 600 people there. As I looked around the church, I thought, you know, we're the only ones here who are going to be able to do anything more for this family than bring chocolate chip cookies and cake. You know, we are going to be able to take care of them.
If we didn't have it, we probably, and I'm being pretty honest, we probably wouldn't have our doors open right now.
Michael and I were married in 1994 in Inverness, California. There are 5 children in the family. The 2 oldest are Michael's daughters. And then we had the 3 children together, Brian, Jacob, and Caitlin.
I talked to him. He was just getting married to Cindy Lou. It took me 2 years before I was able to get the policy written. I suggested a universal life policy, and I said this would be a way to give you protection for your family and at the same time be able to put some cash away for emergencies. Periodically, he would give me a call saying, "I really need the money out of this policy, and my understanding is the only way I can get that is to cancel it. And I hate to do that, but I really need it. We have some severe financial difficulties, and I need that cash value."
And Craig was real persistent and helped Michael kind of problem solve how he could continue to keep that policy and still stay afloat financially.
And I said, "Well, you know, I can keep this policy in force for $1 a month." And he still had some value left in it. And you could set up a loan repayment if you'd like to, so that in the future you'd have this capital available again when you have another emergency.
One day he came home from work and he said he felt like he was inept on the freeway. He just felt like he couldn't drive. And I said, "Michael, you need to go to the doctor." And they scheduled an MRI and a CAT scan. They came out of that and told us it was a glioblastoma multiforme, which is a stage 4 brain cancer. In a span of a week, we went from driving on the freeway to facing the loss of his life.
I got a call from Mike at home in the evening. I'll never forget that call. He was in tears and he had a hard time talking. He said, "My wife, Cindy Lou, have convinced me that this policy is real, and I'd like to hear it from you, from you that it's still in force." And so I said, "Yes, it is. It really is." He said, "You can't believe what a relief this is for me to know that my loved ones are going to be taken care of."
Can you give Daddy a little kiss, Kate?
Hey, thank you, Daddy. Thank you, Daddy.
You're welcome, Katie.
I remember waking up the day that Michael died. You know, I suddenly felt like we're going to really lose him soon. And I'd really like the boys to see him again. And they came in the house and they each dropped their backpack and came right out to the family room where Michael was. They had enough time to get up and give him a hug and tell him they loved him, and then they went outside and he died just minutes afterwards. When Craig came over with the check, it felt rather surreal, but it didn't take long before needs started arising, and initially the money was extremely helpful to pay off large debts to make the monthly budget work.
She was able to invest this wisely. Jacob, when he was 15, was going through the adolescent problems.
I got really depressed quick and I didn't seem to recover. By the summer, I got into drugs and I just kept going downhill from there.
And I ended up using some of that life insurance money to send him to a therapeutic wilderness school. That place really had a powerful effect on him. I just think about my son and, you know, what would have happened to him if I didn't have the access to send him to those programs, because I really felt like I was losing him. And then after I added on to the house, you know, paid the debt, then added on to the house, I stopped there and put the rest away because I felt like there were many years to come and the children were so young and I had no idea what was coming around the bend. Well, this kind of thing came totally out of the blue. Michael and I were both very healthy, very happy, and life was happening for us. I think life insurance is a very good investment. It is absolutely, you know, paramount. Craig really was looking out for Michael, and I just feel a lot of gratitude for the fact that he was able to really convey that to Michael in such strong terms that Michael heard him and made a huge choice that changed the rest of his family's life.
I was employed by a law firm as an international trade analyst, and my wife was working in the human resources area for McKinsey and Company and other employers in the area. And we had a single-family home. We had a nice income, a nice lifestyle, and also a very hectic lifestyle. I mean, my work week was 65 or 70 hours a week usually, sometimes longer, and hers was almost as long, and that's what we did. I guess you call that the being in the rat race. And that changed when the baby was born.
And I did get referred to Joe from somebody in the law firm where he worked, and I called him up, and you know, he had just had his child, who I think was only a couple months old at the time.
We discussed what kind of policies we would want to have for ourselves to protect, and to protect ourselves in the case of something tragic.
And I'd asked him about insurance on Carolyn. He said, well, you know, I'm not completely, I don't think it's necessarily going to be important for her.
2 months after the delivery, and about a month after our policy became official, our term insurance policy, she developed symptoms that, after they did a biopsy, indicated that she had cancer.
I got on my voicemail a message from Joe, and it said, you know, Todd, this is Joe Tyler. Maybe you remember me. And I bought a life insurance policy from you last year. And my first thought was, yeah, I know. It was only a year ago. I know who you are. And secondly, it's kind of weird because Joe's calling me, so he must be okay. And then he said Carolyn had died. And, you know, my first thought was, I'm not sure that that's correct because, God, Carolyn is, 30-some-odd years old and a mother of a young child. And you know, those type of things don't happen to people that you know.
After Carolyn died and I realized that I was going to be a single parent, I realized that I couldn't really do the job that I would want to do as a single parent, working the way that I was. Around the same time, I began to look about my life and think, well, you know, do I really want to be doing this? I'm not seeing my child anymore. I have a nanny taking care of my child. And once the policy cashed in, and I was able to make adjustments in the mortgage and savings and other things I wanted to do, you know, it was a great relief. And definitely lightened the burden quite a bit. I can spend a lot of time with my daughter. We can have 3 meals together. We can play outside. There's a lot more than I can do.
You know, you realize that to a certain degree, I'm the one responsible for the life changes, for Joe having the opportunity to put his life back together in the way that he wants to, as opposed to the way that's dictated to him, you know, by the financial realities of the world. So that all makes you feel real good.
Because tragic occurrences do happen in our lives, and no matter how many precautions we try to take. It's not that expensive when you think about the benefit in the case of a tragic occurrence. And I wouldn't be here, certainly not in the same financial circumstances, without that.
It just makes you feel proud that you can live up to the promises that you've made to an individual, and it makes me feel more comfortable for the promises that I make to all my other clients, to know that I can stand and deliver on those based on the insurance companies that we represent.
Dale Giesler is one of those individuals that come along once in a while, who really never met a stranger. He was very well known, very well liked. A man who was careful about what he did, gave attention to detail. He was very trustworthy, a real honorable guy, deeply loved his children and his wife, and they adored him.
There was just a couple years difference between all 4 of the kids. It made it easy for us to take his life and my life and blend it together because of the kids. Dale enjoyed life. He liked having a good time. He was a self-employed sales manufacturer rep, and he worked out of the home, so he was home every day.
As a manufacturer's representative, he worked regionally primarily, but he had relationships both regionally and nationally. Dale's first purchase was a whole life plan, was a whole life type of plan, and then subsequently he purchased more whole life insurance, and that's where the purchase of disability income came in, to make sure that in the event of either sickness or injury, his income would be impacted as well as it would be in the event of his death. He always had a dream to build a certain kind of house. He wanted a log cabin.
One day I drove by this land and I told him about it. The next morning he was out here, and by the following day he was making an offer on it. When we were clearing the land, we would always have a weenie roast or, you know, cook hamburgers out. We had a lot of parties out here, and he loved that.
The cash values of the insurance policy were an enormous help in covering the initial costs of getting that house built.
He was diagnosed later that year in November that he had CLL. CLL is chronic lymphatic leukemia.
In 2001, Dale got very sick, and it was at that point that we had to apply for the benefits that were available under his disability income insurance. After some careful consideration, he and Diana flew to the Anderson Clinic in Texas, and he was given new hope by the physician there.
Everything that we had heard about CLL, that was the place, the research hospital there, had the new ideas and the aggressive ideas, and so he decided to give them a try. We knew it was a long shot, but, you know, he wanted to try. And, you know, with the disability, it gave us, you know, the ability to do that. Because knowing that disability insurance was coming in every month, I was able to take time from my work to stay with him because obviously he was in no shape to be left alone.
So he underwent the chemotherapy, and through the administration of that, he contracted sepsis.
And he just didn't have anything in his system, you know, because chemo just, you know, kind of takes you down to nothing. And he just didn't have anything in his system to fight back.
Dale passed away in November 2003 at the age of 55. Dale had succumbed to the blood infection.
The day that Tom came out and delivered my life insurance, it was a huge relief, big burden off of me. Like I said, just to start paying things off. I was able to do some things that I'd been wanting to do for a long time that I wasn't able to do with Dale being sick, and not knowing about your finances. That's the one thing with, you know, when you have someone terminally ill, you don't know where you're going. You can't make a plan for the future because you're not sure. Tom has been a tremendous asset to me because basically in the last probably 8 months he's turned into a friend, because he knows I don't know as much as Dale did about the insurance and what there is to it, and obviously I've taken some of the money and invested it, and he's helped me with that, and I rely on his judgment. And you know, he was there in the beginning when Dale really started getting sick, and he's still there for me now.
Every time we would go on vacation or go on a trip, or my dad would, he would always say, okay, if something were to happen to me or Mom, you would have to do this and this and this, and these people and these people and these people will take care of you. And don't worry, because we have a lot of money saved up and put in insurance, so they would help you out if anything were to happen to us. And I thought he was crazy. I was like, what could ever happen? You're overprotective. Why do you keep going on about this? And then when something finally did happen, I was like, whoa, it's a good thing he was prepared and planned ahead. My dad and I were planning on going on a ski trip, and it was tradition for him and I to go skiing together. I first realized something was wrong on the plane there. My dad was sleeping a lot, and he had a headache. He doesn't usually get headaches. And he just kept complaining about it. He had this aneurysm because he had a weird structure of his veins and arteries, and only about 5% of the population had it. And there's only one doctor in the whole world who had invented a surgery that would take care of it. And I was really scared. I was like, will I see my dad ever again? Part of the brain was really affected on his movement and speech. We weren't sure if he was going to be paralyzed in some areas or not. He still doesn't have all feeling back on part of his body. You have to be more patient with my dad now, because he doesn't have all his functions, and it'll take him a while to do something. My dad, for a long time, had been an emergency room physician, but after he got sick, he had to switch over to being a professor at the nearby college near the hospital. Without the disability insurance, we wouldn't have that extra money to make up for the salary. We would have to move out of the house that we live in now. It was my mom's dream house, and he helped design and build it for her. We were still building it at the time he was sick. We most likely would have to change schools, and I'd lose all my friends. I mean, I'd still see them, but just we wouldn't be as close. We were lucky to have that doctor. We were lucky to have insurance. We were lucky to have people back us up and support us, because if we didn't have all of that, my dad wouldn't be here today. Disabled doesn't really necessarily mean being a disaster. I think disasters can also be helped if you plan for disasters and you have a backup plan for if they do happen, I think they become less of disasters and can also be turned into learning experiences.
Oh, that's mine.
No. I've learned that my dad was right all along and I should prepare for whatever will happen.
And I said, well, Shirley, is he okay? And she said, well, not really. She said, Rick's had some heart surgery, and he's also lost both legs.
I licensed this company to begin Rick Concrete construction, which we actually got off the ground in early part of 1978. We had 85, 86, 87 employing about 150 to 170 men in the field, producing one of the largest producers of the track foundations in San Diego County.
I was introduced to Rick from a mutual friend, and that was probably 20 years ago. And Rick and I hit it off pretty well.
I had a father that was failing in health and had no disability insurance. I had thought about it, and then when I met Ron Forney in about 1970 or the late 60s or the early 70s, he had introduced it to me, and it made good sense to me to at least have something.
I added some disability insurance to his portfolio, kept increasing his life insurance until we got it up to about a $500,000 level, and also his disability insurance, we got that up to about $5,000 a month. And so I felt like I was taking good care of him.
Times really got tough, and some of the things that I looked at immediately was things that I couldn't at that time see really an immediate need for. The other thing that I thought about doing was dropping maybe because now I had grown to a sizable amount, right, of actually letting the disability policy go.
I received a call from his wife here at the office, and she said, Ron, Rick's in the hospital. And I said, well, Shirley, is he okay? And she said, well, not really. She said, Rick's had some heart surgery, and he's also lost both legs.
I think Monday or Tuesday, Ron was at the hospital in La Jolla down in San Diego, and explained the coverage that I was going to be in good shape not to have to worry about my insurances, and that they would pay a lump settlement.
I remember that was one of the most difficult calls that I've ever made in the insurance business. Because, you know, what do you say to a guy that's just lost both legs? And I remember very well walking in, and Rick made me feel very comfortable, because I said to Rick, Rick, how you doing? And he said, well, Ron, I'm a hell of a lot shorter than I used to be. And obviously that eased the tension somewhat, but and we chatted, and I assured him that, you know, even though he'd lost his legs, that the principal was going to take care of him financially, and that I had already made the necessary contacts to get the ball rolling as far as the claim situation. And at that point, I remember Rick reaching over, grabbing my hands, and just broke down in tears. And I did too.
Well, it's made all the difference. I mean, I still live in the hills, in the mountains outside of town, in a county community. It's everything.
You know, after 28 years in the business, I have seen a few disabilities, and I've seen a few handle quite a few death claims, but it reiterates the fact of what we're doing in this business, that I will never, ever, for one single moment, doubt the importance of my job and what I'm doing for my clients, and those relationships that we've built over years. It's so rewarding. I just can't tell you in words.
Larry is one of the most intelligent, vivacious, caring people that I ever met in my life.
Strong, dynamic, a great friend.
He was just a very bright guy. Went to MIT, got an undergraduate degree in chemical engineering, got his MBA, pilot's license, glider pilot's license, instrument rating, scuba diver, spoke Spanish fluently.
No one could have ever predicted that my father would be the man that he is today.
Larry took a job. We moved to Columbus, Indiana, and we were there a very short amount of time and met Susan, and in the middle of our planning, we moved.
Larry's boss had been named president of Union Pacific Railroad, and he'd offered Larry a position, so I followed them to Omaha, and we continued our financial planning. They had a cafeteria plan that was available to their employees, and it was a pool of money and a list of benefits the employee could choose from. So Larry and Francie and I incorporated what we were doing on their financial plan to take advantage of the employee benefits that were available. As part of that financial plan, we had identified that he needed disability insurance.
I remember I brought home a progress report and put it on the table, and he had to sign it, and I noticed his hand trembling.
Then we began testing, and then it was diagnosed as Parkinson's. The things that took its toll were he couldn't play soccer with the children. He couldn't play catch with the children. He would throw, lose his balance, fall over.
As he progressed, his tremor became more evident, and especially his speech pattern and the way that he used to carry himself and walk.
About a year later, Larry and Francie took the children to the Grand Cayman Islands on vacation. And during that trip, Larry fell down a rather high flight of stairs and suffered brainstem injury.
He clinically died there. And they revived him and then took him to Miami, and that was, I would say, that was sort of the beginning of a more rapid decline.
He was diagnosed with multiple systems atrophy. Basically, all his major organs are just gradually shrinking and becoming less effective. The family was told then that Larry would continue to deteriorate. So it was a time of a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. How to pay for all these things wasn't a stress. Larry left them in a position that they could continue their life, and their worries were really how to get Larry the best care, how to keep the family together as a cohesive unit. For the last 4 years, Larry's lived at Quality Living Institute.
There are no others like it. They're caring and concerned, and it's the right place for him to be. The fact that we've had the disability insurance has allowed us truly to live in the same style that we had always lived.
When you're doing your financial planning and you're determining what type of product that you want to buy, you really have to give serious thought to what quality care do I want.
Today, Larry is still Larry. Unfortunately, most of it is inside.
Cognitively, he's all there. He's 100% there. He's the man he was. Just physically, he can't do it.
It's hard to see him because you know that when you look at him, I mean, he's just still so bright. He still gets all the jokes.
He's fighting with everything he's got. It'd be easy to give up, you know. I don't know how he does it. You know, our family is proof that life insurance, disability insurance isn't a waste of money or a waste of time.
I don't know where we'd be without it. He has been fighting for 8 years, and all the doctors said, you know, maybe 3 to 5, but, you know, really probably closer to 3. They just didn't know him very well.
I don't remember much from the hospital. It's like you're in a dream. And ever know when you're kind of running away from something and it's going to try to almost catch you and you just wake up? Envision never being able to wake up.
Jerry was diagnosed with a tumor on his optic nerve, went in for surgery. It turned out to be an aneurysm.
Jerry then suffered a stroke, and a couple of strokes, as a matter of fact, which resulted in his brain swelling and emergency surgery to remove some of the brain tissue.
And they said to me, if he survives this next 48 hours, we don't know if he's going to be able to speak or if he'll understand you. He may you may be talking gibberish to him, and we don't know if he's going to be paralyzed on one side.
Jerry was one of two principals in a business. Jerry's attitude always was one of being very responsible, protecting your family, your business, the things that are important to you.
I think we were the typical middle-class family with Jerry working full-time, providing, taking care of the bills, doing all the investments, and I stayed home and raised my family for 13 years and then went back to work part-time. This disability insurance really has meant a great deal to our family.
My ex-partner and I, we looked at that and said, it's a cost, but it's very important to have that.
Or I'm standing there, they're already on the
When
bottom.
Jerry's injury happened, I didn't think he was going to be out of work that long. I mean, I kept thinking this is going to get better really quick, and it hasn't gone back completely to the way we were, and it never will.
You can see a person in a wheelchair and you can look at him and say, oh, he's got people look at me because I can talk and walk and run and hey, he's okay.
Jerry will never have the job, the position that he had pre-disability. He got in his car and was out on the road days at a time, traveling tens of thousands of miles a year, visiting customers. His mental capacity will never allow for that.
Well, he has regained a lot. I mean, from the days in the beginning when he couldn't bathe himself, he couldn't shave, he couldn't eat, he didn't know how to feed himself. He had to learn all that over again.
One little thing will take me more hours than you'd want to dedicate to it. And me, it's hard to explain to my wife when she has a conversation with, don't forget, when you go, you got to do the dishes here and go down and do, and just to be able to do 2 out of those 3, or do, to me inside, it's like, yes, I was able to do, must be peanuts to most people. To me, wow, yes, I was able to do that. Yes, I was able to do this.
The insurance allows Jerry to maintain the lifestyle that he had before the disability. He's able to live in his home. His children are able to continue in their activities and be in college. It means that life goes on for Jerry and he gets a paycheck.
And so many times I say, what must it be like for a family that doesn't have this kind of coverage? I mean, what do you do when all of a sudden your main income is not there anymore?
But we still got trophies.
We love being together. It has just been I want to say a gift, but I can't thank myself enough when we were looking at all of these ifs, ands, or buts, and wow. How I'll never forget signing that thing and how phenomenal that has been.
My husband was a member of the State Department Foreign Service. He was fluent in German, fluent in Spanish.
I remember him always enjoying teaching us how to ride bicycles and planting pansies when we were little, taking us on strolls.
He was also a wonderful support to me when I wanted to go to law school after he had retired. Curiously enough, I was the reason that we got the long-term home health insurance because I'd had a very serious melanoma operation. We were a bit worried that it might return. So I thought, well, we really ought to look into this.
We looked at all of the different elements that would go into the healthcare delivery system, the cost of care, the probability of receiving care, their children lived in the geographic area, and what support they may be able to provide if they became ill. And then we looked at the affordability of the insurance coverage and then selected individual policies based on the overall quality and value.
My husband was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I decided that I wanted to keep him home as long as I could, as long as he knew where he was, who I was. A policy provided for a team to come out from the hospital, nurses and social workers, to evaluate what we needed in the way of safety devices in the home and anything else that we might need in order to keep him home. I was able to keep him here with the home health aides coming in every day, but I took care of him at night.
Some nights she wasn't able to get any sleep at all because my dad had started to roam the house, get dressed at 3 in the morning, and try to leave the home and walk out.
So I began looking for a nursing home. I found what was supposed to have been the best nursing home in the area, but I thought it was too impersonal.
Luckily, my mom found the group home. It was a small house with 8 patients in different stages of dementia.
Each evening when I would come home from work, I would go over to visit my husband, and I saw that he was getting very good care. And I was really pleased that I did have the insurance to cover that. It was very difficult to see such an intelligent, charming man deteriorate. I think that my work was what kept me on an even keel, and I knew he would want me to continue the work.
If the Fosbergs did not have their long-term care coverage in force, Mrs. Fosberg would have needed to provide more informal care support at home.
Look, the forsythia is already starting to bud a little bit. I'm sure I would have had to spin down and sell the home. We didn't have to go into Medicaid, didn't have to bankrupt ourselves. And yet he received excellent care.
Where was this today?
I think we all have a lot of peace of mind, both she and the rest of the family, that my dad's last years were as dignified as possible, and that he was surrounded by a few caregivers who were extremely gentle and very involved with him. We wouldn't have found these people without the group home and the insurance.
Alan must have been one of the kindest men I've ever met.
He was very quick-witted. He was just a fun person to be around.
Alan started his career as a junior high social studies teacher. And then we realized that if we were to have a family, it would take both of us working all the time as teachers. And Alan took the civil service exam and did extremely well. And we ended up in Montgomery, Alabama at Maxwell Air Force Base.
I was a minister of music in the Methodist church system, and I met a young lady named Linda Streepy and her husband, Alan. Alan was a state employee, and Linda was a school teacher, and she also was a fantastic keyboard artist. After I began my insurance business, we became very involved in doing long-term care insurance for educators. And one of our clients was the Autauga County Board of Education, where Linda and Alan were both employed.
Richard and his associates went into our schools and presented the program, and as a result of that, we had about 134 people to sign up that first year.
The policy that Alan and Linda bought was one that paid what was then the current cost of long-term care in Alabama. It didn't have any waiting periods, so it was first-day coverage.
I first started noticing that Alan had a problem when I would ask him to go upstairs and get something for me. And he would get to the top of the stairs and he'd say, "What was it you wanted?" Well, at first, you know, I thought this was just a husband thing about selective memory, and I accused him of it. And finally, one day he said, "No, Linda," he said, "I really can't remember." He must have been about 54 years old, and he was just too young to forget something 2 minutes later.
Within a very short period of time, Alan developed what the doctors referred to initially as galloping Alzheimer's.
He would become aggressive or angry. He was frustrated. He knew something wasn't right, but he didn't know exactly what it was. It was very frustrating. There were weeks of anger, and I would deal with that.
The deterioration was such that In May of one school year, he was teaching school, and in September of that same year, he had to have a full-time caregiver in his home, and he was placed in a nursing home. And after a fairly brief period of time, some few months, 6 or 7, he passed away.
The long-term care health insurance had paid for the caregiver, and when he went into the nursing home, and it started from the first day.
1 out of 2 people over 65 will have to have long-term care of some kind. It's now 1 out of 4 under age 65 will have some type of long-term care. If they're not insured, they're going to spend their assets.
If I had not had this help, I have no idea what I would have done.
From the start, the financial part was taken care of. We could just focus on the emotional part. We're able to enjoy our lives now. Mama doesn't have to work. She can choose to retire, which she did. Now she works doing what she wants to do.
There would have been no way that Linda could have retired early as she has, or been able to enjoy her grandchildren, had those funds not been available through the long-term care insurance policy.
It's a wonderful feeling to know that we were able to help even one of our employees, but I think in the long term it will help a lot of people.
You have to prepare for these kind of things. You know, you can save your money for a rainy day or whatever, but if you don't put some aside now, it's not going to be there when you need it, and to me this is like money in the bank.
I think Alan is very pleased with the insurance and how things turned